But the ghost wing was only the beginning, because the voice Claire heard that night was connected to a secret Damien Moretti never wanted anyone to uncover. And somewhere inside the old mansion, the final truth about the Moretti family is still waiting. A truth powerful enough to destroy the entire empire. Rain covered the stone steps of the Moretti mansion as the wives left one by one in silence. No one fought over the black ring anymore.
No yell stairs.
No polished smiles behind champagne glasses. Only the sound of heels echoing through smoke-filled hallways and the feeling that an empire had just ended without anyone brave enough to say it aloud. Claire stood near the ruined ballroom beneath flickering emergency lights, watching each woman pass through the iron gates like ghosts escaping the place that had imprisoned them for years. Sophia left first. Her crimson gown dragged behind her like blood across shattered marble. She never looked back. Lena followed next, tears mixing with the Manhattan rain. The other wives descended the front steps in silence, while diamonds reflected the fire spreading through the east wing of the mansion. Only Vanessa remained near the ballroom entrance, holding an untouched champagne glass. Claire watched her carefully. For the first time, she understood Vanessa's smile had never been arrogance. It was grief. The sadness of someone who had stayed too long inside this house and learned that everything here eventually ended in loss. Damien stood in the middle of the destroyed ballroom, still holding the black velvet box containing the ring. He was not watching the fire, not watching the guards running through the corridors, only staring at the empty space where the wives had disappeared as if he finally understood silence could feel more terrifying than power. Claire slowly approached him. Damien, he lifted his eyes. Those pale blue eyes no longer resembled the Mafia king Manhattan feared. Only exhaustion remained. Evelyn warned me this would happen. Claire frowned softly. What do you mean? Damien looked around the ballroom slowly dying beneath smoke and flames. She said the moment I chose a woman because of love, instead of power, the mansion would begin collapsing. Somewhere upstairs, glass shattered like confirmation of his words. Claire looked at the black ring in Damien's hand. The object every woman in the mansion once desired now resembled nothing more than an abandoned curse inside the ashes. So what happens now? Damien remained silent for several long seconds before finally saying the thing that hurt Claire most. I don't know if I'm still the man capable of saving this place. And for the first time since entering the Moretti mansion, Claire realized Damien's greatest fear had never been losing power. It was finally having something worth losing. The mansion slowly sank into a strange silence after the wives left. No piano music remained.
No whispered conversations beneath chandeliers.
Only rain and distant fire somewhere inside the east wing. Claire stood beside the massive windows, watching the final car lights disappear beyond the gates when Sophia returned from the dark hallway. Her red gown was stained with rainwater and ash, making her resemble a queen who had survived a war. Claire. Sophia's voice sounded quieter than usual. Claire turned toward her. You didn't leave? Sophia laughed faintly. I stayed here longer than all of them. Her eyes moved slowly across the burned ballroom. Maybe I wanted to watch how this finally ends. Damien stood near the destroyed bar in silence, motionless as stone. Sophia watched him for several seconds before speaking the sentence that froze the room. There's one final rule in this mansion Evelyn never had time to tell you. Claire felt cold spread through her stomach. What rule? Sophia stepped closer beneath the dim emergency lights. No woman Damien ever chooses twice survives. Claire stopped breathing. Damien immediately turned sharply. Sophia. His voice carried warning, but she continued anyway. Every wife here knew it. Claire looked toward Damien slowly. What does that mean? Sophia answered for him. The Moretti family never allowed Damien to truly love anyone. Heavy silence covered the ballroom. Claire remembered the wives' expressions during ring night. Not only jealousy, fear. They had never feared losing power. They feared becoming the woman Damien truly chose. Damien stepped closer. Enough. But Sophia shook her head.
No.
She deserves the truth. Then she looked directly at Claire. The first woman Damien chose twice was Evelyn. The air tightened painfully. Rain slammed harder against the windows. Sophia's voice dropped almost to a whisper. 3 days later, she died. Damien's hand tightened into a fist. Claire stared at him for a long moment. You knew about this? Damien did not answer immediately, and that silence hurt more than any confession. I thought it was only a rumor. His voice sounded rough. Until Evelyn. Sophia smiled sadly. This mansion doesn't kill women with bullets. She lifted her eyes toward the burned ceiling above them. It kills them with power. Suddenly, Claire understood Evelyn's message. Choose her before the house destroys her. It had never been a warning about the mansion itself. It was a warning about the system living inside it. A system that consumed every woman who was truly loved. Dawn settled over the Moretti mansion like cold ash after a funeral. The fire in the East Wing had finally been extinguished, but the smell of smoke still clung to the hallways like memories refusing to die. Claire walked into the ballroom alone after the mansion finally fell silent. No guards remained.
No guests.
No wives wrapped in diamonds and jealousy. Only the enormous emptiness where everything once revolved around Damien Moretti. Broken chandeliers lay scattered across the marble floor. Champagne had dried into dark stains beneath shattered crystal. White flowers from ring night had been crushed beneath ash and footsteps. Claire moved slowly through the ballroom like someone walking through the corpse of a dead kingdom. She stopped at the exact place where Damien had once placed the black ring before her. Strange. Only nights ago this room had been filled with fake laughter, whispered rivalries, and women willing to destroy each other for power. Now there was only silence. A silence, so heavy she could almost hear her own heartbeat inside it. Claire lifted her eyes toward the burned chandelier hanging above the ballroom. And for the first time, she truly understood Evelyn. Not as the woman Damien once loved, but as a wife trapped inside this golden prison. A woman chosen by the most powerful man in Manhattan, yet never truly free. You shouldn't be here alone. Damien's voice behind her broke the silence softly. Claire turned slightly as he descended the grand staircase, wearing only a black dress shirt, his tuxedo jacket gone. The wound on his shoulder had stained the white bandage beneath dark red. But what hurt Claire more was his face. Exhausted.
Hollow.
Damien looked across the ruined ballroom for several long seconds before speaking again. I used to think this place made me stronger. Claire slowly turned toward him. And now? Damien laughed quietly, a rough sound dangerously close to breaking apart. Now I realize it only made everyone around me die slowly. Silence settled between them again. Damien stepped toward the center of the ballroom, standing exactly where he had once offered the black ring. My father always said power was the only thing that survived forever. He lowered his eyes toward his hands. But everything here eventually turned to ash. Claire walked closer to him. Not everything. Damien lifted his eyes toward her. And for the first time since the mansion began burning, Claire saw something softer inside them. No Mafia king.
No untouchable ruler.
Only a man exhausted from pretending to be a monster for too long. Then suddenly, piano music echoed from somewhere upstairs. Both of them froze instantly. Evelyn's melody drifted slowly through the empty ballroom like a voice reaching from the past. Damien closed his eyes briefly. Ghost wing. Claire looked toward the dark staircase leading upward. And suddenly she understood. The mansion was not finished revealing its final secrets yet. Evelyn's piano melody still echoed somewhere inside Ghost Wing as Claire followed Damien upstairs. The mansion had become terrifyingly quiet now. No guards rushing through hallways. No wives whispering behind closed doors. Only dim emergency lights staining the stone walls red and the smell of smoke lingering stubbornly in the air. Damien walked ahead of her slower than usual. Blood still stained the bandage beneath his black shirt where the chandelier glass had cut into his shoulder. But he no longer seemed to feel pain. What frightened Claire now was his silence. Damien pushed open the ghost wing door once more. The room remained frozen beneath weak golden light, as if time itself had never left the night Evelyn died. The black piano stood beside the giant windows. Old candle wax still melted across its surface. Damien slowly crossed the room and finally sat at the piano bench. Claire remained behind him watching quietly. A Mafia king who once controlled Manhattan now sat inside shadows like a man too exhausted to continue fighting himself. I used to hate this room. His voice sounded rough and low. Claire said nothing. Damien brushed his fingers lightly across the dusty piano keys. After Evelyn died, I locked Ghost Wing because I thought if I stopped seeing this place, I wouldn't have to remember. Silence stretched between them. Rain hammered softly against the mansion windows outside. Damien finally laughed quietly, a sound dangerously close to breaking apart. But I remembered her every single day. Something inside Claire's chest tightened painfully as she watched his silhouette beneath the weak golden lights. Damien opened the black velvet box and placed the ring carefully on top of the piano. My father always said a powerful man should never love anyone too much. He stared at the ring for several seconds. I tried to obey him. Claire stepped closer slowly. But you loved Evelyn. Damien closed his eyes briefly. More than my own life. The air inside Ghost Wing suddenly became difficult to breathe. Claire watched Damien's trembling hand tighten slowly into a fist. A man who spent half his life learning how not to feel was finally breaking apart in front of her. The night Evelyn died, his voice almost disappeared. I should have left the mansion with her. Claire remained still. Damien continued quietly, like a confession spoken to ghosts. She begged me to abandon the empire. A bitter smile crossed his face. But I was stupid. I thought I could protect both her and power at the same time. Rain slammed harder against the windows outside. Damien stared toward the darkness beyond the glass. I spent the next 13 years becoming the exact man Evelyn feared I would become. Claire felt her throat tighten painfully. She stepped beside him and very gently touched the blood-stained bandage on his shoulder. Damien froze instantly. Not because of pain, because of softness. Claire carefully replaced the soaked bandage with trembling fingers. The room became so quiet she could hear Damien's breathing slowly changing beneath her touch. Damien, she whispered softly. You are not your father. Damien lifted his eyes toward her. For the first time, those cold blue eyes no longer resembled a weapon. Only exhaustion and something dangerously human remained. You don't understand, Claire. His voice dropped almost into despair. I've watched too many people die for staying beside me. Claire held his gaze steadily. But I'm still here. Silence stretched between them. Damien looked at her like he had finally remembered what it felt like to be touched without fear. Then, very slowly, he lifted one hand and rested it softly against Claire's face. The movement almost trembled. I can't lose you too. Pain twisted through Claire's chest. Not because of fear, but because for the first time she realized Damien Moretti no longer feared losing the mansion. He feared losing her. And that was the most dangerous thing inside this house. Rain continued falling outside the Moretti mansion as Claire left Ghost Wing and walked slowly down the hallway washed in dim red emergency lights. The mansion now felt almost empty. No wives in expensive heels. No servants rushing nervously through corridors whenever Damien appeared. Only wind slipping through half-open doors and the lingering scent of smoke from the fire. Claire thought she was alone until she saw Vanessa standing beside a tall window near the end of the hallway. She still wore the silver gown from ring night, but her perfect makeup had blurred beneath rainwater and ash, making her look for the first time like an ordinary woman instead of an untouchable queen. Vanessa never turned around when she spoke. So you finally know the truth.
Claire
Stopped several feet behind her. How long have you known? Vanessa laughed softly, a tired sound filled with pain. Since the night you entered the mansion. The atmosphere suddenly tightened. Claire stepped closer. Then why didn't you tell me? Vanessa finally looked at her. And for the first time since meeting her, Claire no longer saw danger inside those eyes. Only grief. Because Evelyn begged me to keep the secret. Pain twisted sharply through Claire's chest. Vanessa stared through the rain-covered glass for several long moments before continuing. Everyone inside this mansion thought I stayed for power. A sad smile crossed her lips briefly. But I stayed because of Evelyn. Claire stopped breathing. Vanessa tightened her fingers around the empty champagne glass in her hand. Evelyn saved my life once. Her voice softened, as if speaking from a distant memory. I was 19 then. My family owed the Morettis too much money. Damien's father wanted to force me into the wives system. Cold spread through Claire instantly. Vanessa continued quietly. Evelyn stopped him. Silence stretched beneath the sound of rain. She said no woman should ever become property. Claire stared at Vanessa for a long moment. Suddenly, everything about her finally made sense. The mysterious smile, the watchful eyes, the strange calmness every time Ghostwing was mentioned. Vanessa had never been the enemy. She was the witness. After Evelyn died, Vanessa inhaled slowly. I stayed in the mansion to make sure the truth about you didn't disappear with her. Claire felt her throat tighten painfully. You protected me? Vanessa nodded faintly. More than you know. Then she looked directly at Claire with something dangerously close to affection. Every time Damien started getting too close to the truth, I made him look somewhere else. Claire could barely breathe. Why? Vanessa smiled softly. Because Evelyn loved Damien enough to keep protecting him, even after death. Heavy silence filled the hallway. Claire looked around the darkened mansion. So, what happens now? Vanessa's eyes drifted toward the distant ghost wing corridor. Now it's too late to keep lying. Then she stepped closer and whispered the sentence that turned Claire's blood cold. Someone inside this mansion is still loyal to Damien's father. Claire froze instantly. Who? Vanessa slowly shook her head. I don't know yet. Her expression suddenly became serious. But they will never allow Evelyn's daughter to leave this place alive. Thunder exploded outside the mansion. And for the first time since the wives walked away, Claire realized the real war had only just begun. Thunder still shook the Manhattan sky as Vanessa led Claire down into the western basement beneath the mansion. The hallway below felt colder than the rest of the house, old yellow lights flickering weakly across dusty stone walls. Claire followed behind Vanessa in silence, her heartbeat growing heavier with every echoing footstep beneath the underground corridors. Damien's father called this place the record room. Vanessa's voice remained quiet as they stopped before an old iron door blackened by fire damage. No one outside the Moretti family was ever allowed inside. Claire stared at the broken lock damaged during the fire. A cold feeling crawled slowly down her spine. Vanessa pushed the door open. The smell of burned paper and old smoke immediately flooded outward. The record room was far larger than Claire expected. Endless shelves filled the darkness like a maze. Hundreds of black storage boxes rested beneath dust and ash. And in the middle of that silence, Claire suddenly realized the mansion had never truly been a home. It was an archive of disappeared women. Vanessa walked toward a scorched wooden table near the center of the room and placed an old file in front of Claire. Open it. Claire looked down at the cover. Isabella Moretti. Wife number 4. Her fingers trembled as she opened the folder. A photograph of a beautiful young woman stared back at her with unbearably sad eyes. The final line beneath the report read, "Deceased after pregnancy complications." Claire swallowed painfully. Vanessa pulled another file from the shelf. Sofia Bellucci. Wife number 7. Deceased. Then another.
Elena Russo.
Wife number 11. Missing. Cold spread through Claire so violently she nearly lost balance. Oh God, Vanessa looked slowly around the endless black boxes filling the room. Damien's father called this system the foundation of power. Her voice darkened with hatred. But really this place is just a graveyard. Claire stepped backward slightly. Does Damien know about this? Vanessa remained silent for several seconds. He knew women disappeared. She looked at Claire carefully. But he never knew his father kept records of them like trophies. The room suddenly became difficult to breathe inside. Claire stared across the endless shelves beneath dim yellow lights. Dozens of women, maybe hundreds. Women who entered the mansion wearing wedding dresses and hope, only to vanish from the world like they had never existed. Evelyn found this room before she died. Vanessa continued quietly. That's why she tried to escape with you. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. Then suddenly, she noticed one final black box resting separately at the end of the table. No dust covered it, like someone had opened it recently. Claire stepped toward it very slowly before lifting the lid. Inside rested only one file. Claire Moretti. Her heartbeat stopped. Vanessa instantly went pale. Impossible. Claire opened the file with violently trembling hands. There was no photograph inside. Only one handwritten sentence in black ink. If she returns alive, finish what Evelyn started. Dead silence filled the record room. Then somewhere deep in the darkness behind the endless shelves, someone pulled back the slide of a gun. The sound of a gun being loaded inside the darkness of the record room froze both Claire and Vanessa instantly. The air suddenly became suffocating, as if the basement beneath the mansion had stopped breathing with them. Claire turned sharply toward the endless rows of dusty files disappearing into shadows. No one visible. Only rainwater dripping somewhere through cracked pipes and flickering yellow lights turning the room into a nightmare. Vanessa instinctively pulled Claire backward. Run. But before either of them could move, an older man's voice echoed calmly from the far end of the room. She truly does look like Evelyn. A figure stepped slowly out from the darkness. Between the shelves, the man wore an old black suit, silver hair combed perfectly backward. A gun rested comfortably in his hand, like part of his body. Claire felt cold spread through her stomach the second she saw his eyes. Not hatred, not panic, only the frozen loyalty of someone who had survived too long inside the Moretti system. Vanessa immediately went pale. Mr. Ricci, the old man smiled faintly. It's been a long time, Vanessa. Claire looked toward her. You know him? Vanessa nodded slowly, her voice almost shaking. He was Alessandro Moretti's closest advisor. The room tightened with tension. Ricci walked slowly toward them, through the files of dead wives. The old boss always believed the girl would someday return to the mansion. His eyes finally settled on Claire. And he said if that ever happened, the gun slowly lifted. History needed to be finished. Vanessa instantly stepped in front of Claire. No, Ricci looked at her with disappointment. Evelyn made you weak. Vanessa smiled sadly. No, her expression hardened slowly. Evelyn reminded me I was still human. Heavy silence filled the record room. Claire's heartbeat pounded painfully inside her chest. Then suddenly, piano music echoed from somewhere upstairs. Everyone froze. Evelyn's melody. Slow. Beautiful. Haunting enough to feel unreal. For the first time, Ricci lost color in his face. Impossible. The piano echoed through the mansion corridors like a ghost returning after 13 years of silence. Claire looked upward toward the dark ceiling. Ghost wing. Vanessa whispered softly. Ricci became distracted for one fatal second. And that was all Vanessa needed. She slammed against his gun arm violently. A gunshot exploded through the record room. Paper files burst from the shelves like black snow. Claire dropped to the floor instinctively. Vanessa screamed. Claire, run. Claire forced herself up and sprinted from the basement as a second gunshot thundered behind her. Her heartbeat spiraled wildly while she ran through the dark mansion hallways. The piano melody grew louder with every step, like something inside the mansion was guiding her deeper into the house. Claire finally shoved open the ghost wing door. The room remained glowing beneath weak golden light. But this time, the piano was playing by itself. Nobody sat there. Nobody touched the keys. Yet the melody continued. Claire stepped closer, while her breathing nearly disappeared entirely. Then she saw it resting on top of the piano. An old cassette tape. And beside it, familiar handwriting from Evelyn. For Damien. Only after the truth survives. Claire still stood frozen before the self-playing piano when Damien burst into Ghost Wing. His breathing sounded rougher than usual, the gun still clenched tightly in his hand. But the second he saw Claire unharmed, his entire body finally relaxed like a man pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Claire. He crossed the room quickly and gripped her shoulders gently. Are you hurt? Claire shook her head immediately and pointed toward the cassette tape resting on the piano. Damien, her voice almost trembled. Evelyn left this for you. The atmosphere inside Ghost Wing instantly shifted. The piano stopped playing the exact moment Damien saw Evelyn's handwriting. All color drained from his face. He approached the piano slowly, like he feared touching the final memory of Evelyn too roughly might destroy it forever. His hands trembled faintly as he picked up the cassette tape. Claire had never seen Damien Moretti shake before anything in his life. Until Evelyn. Damien stared at the old cassette player beside the piano for several long seconds before finally pressing play. Static crackled softly through Ghost Wing. Then Evelyn's voice appeared. Gentle.
Exhausted.
Painfully human. If you're hearing this, a brief silence followed. Then it means I failed. Damien closed his eyes slowly. Claire saw his jaw tighten like he was trying desperately not to break apart inside this room. Evelyn continued softly. Damien, I know you'll try to save the mansion. A faint laugh escaped through the old recording. You always think you can save everything. Claire watched Damien carefully because that was exactly what he had done his entire life. Save power. Save the empire. Save the Moretti name. Everything except himself. If Claire ever returns to the mansion, Evelyn's voice softened further. Don't let her become part of this place. Pain twisted sharply through Claire's chest. Damien still had not moved. I love you. A burst of static interrupted briefly. But love cannot survive inside this house. Tears finally slipped down Claire's face. Evelyn continued almost in a whisper. Your father will always force you to choose between power and the person you love. Claire looked toward Damien as the words echoed through Ghost Wing. Because that was exactly what the mansion was doing now. So this time, Evelyn's voice nearly disappeared beneath static. Leave before the mansion takes her away from you too. The recording ended. Ghost Wing fell into complete silence.
No piano. No rain.
Only Damien's heavy breathing inside the room filled with ghosts. He stood motionless beside the cassette tape for a long time, then finally laughed softly. A broken sound painful enough to tear through Claire's chest. 13 years. His voice sounded rough. For 13 years I thought keeping this empire alive was the only way not to betray her. Damien lifted his eyes toward the dark mansion beyond the windows. But what Evelyn wanted, he turned toward Claire, was for me to leave it behind. Silence stretched between them. Then, very slowly, Damien picked up the black ring from the piano. Claire felt her heartbeat tighten painfully. This was the moment everything changed. Damien stepped toward her. No Mafia king remained now. No ruler of the Moretti Empire. Only a man finally standing before the greatest choice of his life.
Power.
Or her. Claire, his voice dropped low and dangerously close to breaking apart. If I leave this mansion tonight, there's no going back. Claire held his gaze for several long seconds. And for the first time, she realized Damien Moretti truly feared the future more than the past. Ghost Wing remained silent after Evelyn's recording ended when gunshots suddenly exploded somewhere downstairs. One shot. Then two more. Claire instantly turned toward the hallway. Damien immediately pulled her behind him with an instinct so automatic it almost frightened her. His entire body shifted back into the dangerous calm Claire remembered from the first night she entered the mansion. But this time it was different. Not a Mafia king protecting his empire. A man protecting the last thing he could not survive losing again. Stay here. Damien loaded his gun and moved toward the Ghost Wing door. But before he could leave, Vanessa burst into the hallway breathing hard. Blood streaked across her arm. Ricci called reinforcements. Her voice nearly shook. The entire west corridor is locked down. Damien tightened his grip around the gun. How many? Vanessa looked at him with visible fear. Enough to finish what your father started. The atmosphere instantly turned ice cold. Claire felt her heartbeat pounding as footsteps began echoing somewhere deeper inside the mansion.
Slow.
Even. More than one person. Damien pulled Claire farther back inside Ghost Wing. Any other exit? Vanessa shook her head. Not from this floor. Glass shattered outside the corridor. Then a man's voice echoed calmly beneath the flickering emergency lights. Mr. Moretti. Terrifying silence spread across the mansion. The old boss ordered the girl never leaves alive. Claire felt her blood turn cold. Damien stepped even farther in front of her. Claire has nothing to do with this. The man outside laughed quietly. That's exactly why she's dangerous. The footsteps moved closer. Vanessa pulled Claire beside the piano. If things get worse, she whispered softly. Run when I tell you. Claire immediately shook her head. No, but Damien suddenly turned toward her. And for the first time in this entire story, Claire saw real fear inside his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. Claire. His voice sounded rough with desperation. If anything happens, you leave this mansion. Pain tore through Claire's chest. I'm not leaving you. Silence stretched briefly between them. Damien gently touched her face. A movement so soft it almost hurt beneath the sound of gunfire and darkness. That's what Evelyn said too. Suddenly the ghost wing door exploded inward, which shattered from the hinges. Two men dressed in black stormed inside, with blinding flashlights. Damien instantly shoved Claire behind the piano and fired. Gunshots thundered violently through Ghost Wing. One attacker collapsed instantly. The second continued shooting. Windows exploded into shattered glass. Vanessa screamed somewhere behind Claire. Smoke filled the room. Damien stood between Claire and the darkness flooding into Ghost Wing like the final wall protecting her. Then another gunshot echoed from the hallway. Damien suddenly staggered. Claire saw blood spreading slowly across the chest of his black shirt. Damien. Time stopped. Damien stumbled backward half a step, but kept his gun aimed toward the doorway. The final man standing in the corridor slowly lifted his weapon directly toward Claire. And, without hesitation, Damien threw himself in front of her again. The second gunshot exploded through Ghost Wing, and Claire's scream shattered the silence of the mansion. Damien's blood spread across the floorboards of Ghost Wing, while the gunfire finally faded into silence. Claire dropped beside him, barely able to breathe. Her hands shook violently as she tried to hold him upright against her chest.
No, no.
Damien, look at me. Red emergency lights flickered through the room, turning everything into a nightmare painted in blood. Vanessa stood near the shattered doorway holding a smoking gun, breathing hard. The final attacker outside the corridor had collapsed. But Claire no longer saw anything except Damien. Blood spread too quickly across his black shirt. Damien winced faintly while Claire pressed trembling hands against the wound in his chest. It's okay. His voice sounded rough and weaker than she had ever heard before. Don't say that. Claire nearly broke apart. You're going to be okay. Damien stared at her for several long seconds beneath the weak golden lights of Ghost Wing. And for the first time since she entered the mansion, he finally looked peaceful. That frightened Claire more than the blood. Claire. Damien slowly opened his hand. The black ring still rested in his palm. The same ring that once drove the entire mansion mad with desire now lay covered in blood and ash. Damien very slowly pressed it into Claire's hand. Take it. Claire instantly shook her head as tears finally slipped down her face. No, Damien gently closed her fingers around the ring. If I die, no, Claire broke completely for the first time. You're not dying. Trembling silence filled Ghost Wing. Damien looked at her like he wanted to memorize every detail of her face forever. Do you know the saddest thing about me? His voice barely rose above a whisper. Claire could not answer. Damien laughed softly. A beautiful sound filled with pain. I spent half my life learning how to become the most powerful man in the city. His eyes drifted toward the black ring in Claire's hand. But you're the first person who ever made me want to leave everything behind. Pain twisted through Claire so sharply, she could barely breathe. Damien gently touched her hair. And that's why this mansion will always try to kill you. Claire lowered her head, crying while holding his hand tightly. Then come with me. Damien froze slightly. Claire lifted tear-filled eyes toward him. Stop choosing the mansion. Rain hammered heavily outside Ghost Wing. Claire slowly removed the black ring from her hand and placed it back into Damien's palm. If loving me destroys you, her voice trembled softly, then don't choose me. The room fell into heartbreaking silence. Vanessa remained frozen in the distance. Because for the first time in the entire history of the mansion, a woman had refused the black ring. Damien stared at the ring for several long seconds. Then toward Claire. Something inside him finally shattered completely. Not weakness. Not fear. A man finally understanding that real love was never possession. Claire, his voice nearly broke apart. You still don't understand. He slowly closed his hand around hers with the ring between them. I don't want power to save me anymore. Silence stretched between them. Then Damien looked around Ghost Wing one final time.
Evelyn esse piano.
The dust-covered portraits. The mansion that had consumed his entire family. Finally, he looked back at Claire. I'm choosing you anyway. The final dawn settled over the Moretti mansion like cold ash covering a dead empire. Ghost Wing had finally fallen silent after the gunshots, the tears, and the confessions this house had buried for more than a decade. Claire sat beside Damien near Evelyn's piano while Vanessa wrapped fresh bandages around the wound in his chest with blood-stained hands. No one spoke for a long time. The mansion around them had become too quiet. No guards walking the corridors.
No champagne glasses clinking beneath chandeliers.
No wives fighting over the black ring anymore. Only silence. A terrifying silence, so complete Claire finally understood why Evelyn once called this place a gilded tomb. Damien slowly stood once Vanessa tied the final bandage. The wound made him stagger slightly, but he ignored it. Claire instinctively caught his arm. You need to rest. Damien looked at her for several long seconds, then gently placed his hand over hers like softness itself still felt unfamiliar to him. There's something I need to do. Claire immediately understood what that meant. The mansion still existed, and as long as it remained standing, the curse of the Moretti family had not ended. Damien left Ghost Wing alone.
No guards.
No empire. Only the black ring hidden inside his blood-stained coat. Claire stood in the second-floor hallway watching him walk through the mansion one final time. A Mafia king who once controlled an entire city now moved through his own home, like the last survivor after a war. Damien crossed the destroyed ballroom where Ring Knight once ruled everything. Burned chandeliers still hung overhead like corpses inside the dark. He stopped for several seconds at the exact place where he had once placed the black ring before Claire. And for the first time in his life, Damien finally understood his father had been wrong. Power did not make men untouchable. It only made them lonely enough to believe they needed no one. Evelyn's piano melodies suddenly echoed faintly somewhere behind him. Damien closed his eyes briefly. A broken smile touched his lips. I know. His voice nearly disappeared into the silence of the mansion. Then he continued walking downstairs. The record room remained covered in ash and scattered files belonging to dead wives. Damien stood in the center of the room for a long time staring at the hundreds of names his family had buried to protect power. Isabella, Sophia,
Anna.
Women who had never truly been allowed to live as human beings inside this house. Damien finally opened the black velvet box. The black ring reflected weak emergency lights beneath the smoke. The symbol of absolute Moretti power now resembled nothing more than a chain passed from one generation to another. Damien slowly placed the ring among the dusty files. Then he lit a match. The flames spread across the old papers quietly at first.
Slow. Silent.
But unstoppable. Damien stood motionless, while the fire consumed the record room around him. Ash drifted through the air like black snow. And somewhere inside the burning silence of the mansion, Damien Moretti finally stopped being his father's son. The fire from the record room spread through the lower floors of the Moretti mansion like something finally released after years of being buried alive. Claire stood on the second floor watching red flames reflect across marble hallways while fire alarms screamed through the estate. But this time no one tried to stop the fire. No one wanted to save the mansion anymore. Vanessa stepped beside Claire silently, her eyes fixed on the flames slowly consuming the walls of the Moretti empire. Evelyn once said this house would only die when Damien learned to love someone more than power. Claire felt her chest tighten painfully. She knew this would happen? Vanessa nodded very slowly. Evelyn always knew Damien was never born to become a monster. Glass shattered somewhere below them. Flames began swallowing the ballroom. White curtains caught fire first before spreading across the ceiling like wounds opening inside the darkness. Claire looked around the mansion one final time. This was the place that destroyed Evelyn. The place that turned wives into prisoners. The place that made Damien lose himself for 13 years. And now it was finally dying with every secret buried inside it. Damien emerged up the staircase through smoke and firelight. Ash covered his black shirt. Blood still stained the bandage wrapped around his chest. But his eyes had changed. No cold king of Manhattan remained there. No man trapped between power and guilt. Only a strange freedom Claire almost failed to recognize. Damien stopped directly in front of her. The record room is gone. Claire stared at him quietly. And the black ring? A brief silence followed. Then Damien smiled faintly, burning with the rest of the empire. Part of the ballroom's ceiling collapsed behind them. Vanessa watched the fire spreading upward before finally turning toward Claire. Go. Claire froze slightly. What about you? Vanessa looked toward the burning mansion beneath the first light of dawn. A sad smile touched her lips. I stayed here too long already. Damien stepped closer slowly. Vanessa, but she shook her head. Evelyn saved me once. Her expression softened for the first time. Now it's my turn to help her finish this. Painful silence filled the hallway. Claire embraced Vanessa quickly before tears could fall again. Vanessa whispered softly into her ear. Don't let Damien become the man this house wanted him to be. Claire nodded faintly. Then Damien took her hand. Tight enough to feel more like a promise than any spoken confession. Together they descended the grand staircase beneath falling chandeliers and burning ceilings. No guards remained. No empire. Only two people finally escaping the place that imprisoned them in different ways. When the mansion doors opened, the Manhattan rain had stopped. The first light of dawn covered the stone steps while behind them, the Moretti mansion slowly collapsed into flames. And, for the first time since entering this house, Claire heard something other than war. Silence. The sun slowly rose behind the Manhattan skyline while Claire and Damien stood at the bottom of the mansion steps with the burning Moretti estate collapsing behind them. Flames reflected through shattered windows like the final memory of a dynasty that once terrified the entire city. But the strangest thing now was the silence. No screams remained.
No gunshots.
No wives fighting over power or bloody negotiations between Mafia families. Only distant fire and the breathing of two people who had finally survived the ruins of love, guilt, and the past. Damien still held Claire's hand tightly like. Letting go for even 1 second might allow the mansion to drag him back inside. Claire studied the side of his face beneath the first light of dawn. Blood had dried against the collar of his black shirt. The cold blue eyes that once made Manhattan bow now held only exhaustion and a strange kind of peace. What are you thinking about? Claire asked softly. Damien looked toward the burning mansion for several long moments before answering. I used to think if I lost this place, I would lose myself too. A broken smile touched his lips faintly. Turns out this is the first time I've ever actually been free. Pain moved gently through Claire's chest in the softest possible way. Somewhere down the street, fire sirens finally echoed through the waking city. But nobody was coming to save the mansion anymore. The Moretti Empire died the moment Damien chose Claire instead of power. Claire slowly stepped closer toward him. So, what happens now? Damien looked at her. No walls remained.
No darkness.
Only the raw honesty of a man who had lost everything except the woman standing in front of him. Now, he gently touched her face. I learned how to live like a human being. Tears finally slipped down Claire's cheeks again, but this time they no longer belonged to grief. Only relief after too many nights filled with war. Damien slowly lowered his forehead against hers beneath the sunrise and drifting ash. Evelyn once told me, his voice nearly disappeared into the morning wind, that someday someone would make me want to leave this entire world behind. Claire laughed softly through tears. And she was right. Damien smiled too for the first time without pain, without brokenness. Only peace remained. Somewhere behind them, the final section of the ballroom collapsed into flames. The Moretti mansion, the place that consumed love, power, and every woman trapped inside it, finally disappeared from Manhattan forever. Claire looked toward the fire one last time before intertwining her fingers with Damien's. No more black ring. No more wives. No more mansion. Only two people finally choosing each other after surviving everything else. Damien stared toward the road ahead for a long time. A future without empire. Without a throne. Without the name that once terrified an entire city. Only a future that finally belonged to him. Then very slowly, Damien walked away with Claire beneath the first light of the Manhattan morning, never looking back. And somewhere inside the silence left behind by the burning mansion, Evelyn finally rested in peace. He ruled the city for half his life. She taught him how to leave it. If you enjoyed this emotional cinematic story of the Moretti family, please like, subscribe, and support the channel to follow more powerful mafia romance stories, dark family dramas, and unforgettable emotional journeys. Your support helps us create even bigger and better stories for you.